To design your pocket, you need to first measure your cell phone to figure out what size you need your pocket to be. In order to measure, take one of these flexible tape measures in the lab and go ahead, place the end of it on one side, bring it across, and then place it down on the other side. And then check the tape measure to see what you get. So for this example, this measures 10 centimeters down, across, and down to the other side. Then go ahead and measure the length as well. Same procedure, holding it down against the edge and bringing it right down to that opposite edge. So this measures 10 by 17. Once you've got that measurement, you need to add 6 centimeters to each of those two measurements because you need a couple of things. You need seam allowance, which is that bit that you're going to fold under and so that you can sew on the very edge. And you also need what I call wiggle room. You don't want your pocket to be so snug fitting that you can just barely slide your phone in and out. You need a little extra space to allow it to slide freely and easily in and out of the pocket that it goes into. So just remember, once you've taken your measurements, add 6 centimeters to both the width and the length. Cut out your rectangle and go and serge it. Once you have cut out your rectangle and serged it, it's ready for preparing to sew. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to fold down the top edge. I'm folding it down approximately 2 centimeters because the hem on the top looks a little bit nicer if it's just a little bit wider. Always you should be folding this top edge right sides together. This is very similar to the pocket that you would have done in grade 8 on your boxer shorts. So if you remember how you did that patch pocket, this is going to be very much the same. Folding it down like this, you're going to go ahead and sew here on the 15 line, and then again also here on the 15 line. I'm going to flip my pin sideways and position on the 15 line. Very short seam. You could go all the way forward, all the way back, and then all the way forward to complete this seam. Once you've completed both of the edges of the pocket, you're going to put your thumbs into the corners that you've just finished sewing and just push those corners to the outside. You can use a point presser or your scissors, just don't be too aggressive pushing, but push into those corners to square them out. You can see how this corner has been squared out quite nicely. This one is still sort of slanted inwards. If I just put my scissors into the corner and give it a push, it looks much more square. Now this is ready for pressing. To press the pocket, we'll start by pressing that top edge that you've already sewn. So you had it sewn at 2 centimeters, folded over. So just go ahead and give it a press so that it lays flat. And then turn your pocket and just press those seam allowances under. Remember, you sewed those at the 15 line. And so just press them at the 15 line. If you want to use the seam gauge to check that, that's okay. But give them a good press so they lay flat. And then finally, you can press the bottom edge up 15 as well. So that's your seam allowance. That's why you needed to cut that extra amount when you cut out this rectangle to make a pocket. If you didn't add seam allowance, the pocket would get folded in and would end up being too small to hold your phone. So that is your pocket. Once you've pressed it on the wrong side, flip it over, give it a final press on the right side, and now you're ready to finish the pocket. A few steps to finish the pocket. The first thing we need to do is we need to sew this top edge, which was the part that we already sewed those little side seams. We're going to sew this down flat so that it doesn't flip out once the pocket is inserted onto the bag. So let's just go ahead and do that first. I usually tell people to line up against the edge of the serging, and that is where their stitching should happen. And you're going to sew from this end all the way to that end, a little reverse at the beginning and at the end. Once you've sewn the top, you can see on the inside it really doesn't show because you've sewn essentially right along that serging line. On the outside you have a nice finished top edge. So that is the top of your pocket. Now it's time to place it onto your bag. So take the back of the bag, which is that plain piece just with the casing at the top, and decide where you want this pocket to be. I always recommend don't put it at the very, very top, because if you do that, you can imagine when you draw up your drawstring, the top of the pocket is sort of crumpled up, and so it's hard to access and it's in a kind of an awkward location. It's too high up. I also don't really recommend putting it at the very bottom, especially if you have a cell phone in here. This is the first thing that will hit the ground when you put the bag down on the floor somewhere, so you don't want this to be sitting there either. I like having it in the middle. Some people put it offset. Once you've decided where you want to place it, just go ahead, position it. Mine is easy. I have stripes, so I can kind of just line it up and see that it's straight. Put a pin in each of the 4 corners, and then you'll be ready to sew it on. To sew the pocket on, just go ahead and line up. If you have a clear foot, you should switch to a clear foot on your machine. Line it up so that you're starting on the top right corner of the pocket, because you're going to sew down across the bottom and then up the other side. So make sure that you start in the top right corner. Go ahead and position needle down, foot down, and don't forget to do a good reverse at the beginning and at the very end. Because you're going to be reaching in and out of this a lot, you want to make sure that it's strong and this doesn't pull apart. So even if you reverse a couple of times, that's a good idea. So go ahead and start your edge stitching, so you're sewing very close to the edge of the pocket. Approaching the corner, remember to come close to the edge with your needle down. Then you can go ahead and lift your foot, turn, and go across the bottom. Again, needle down, foot up, turn, foot back down, and finish. Don't forget to do a good reverse when you finish. I'm going to reverse and reverse a second time. And your pocket should look something like this when you are finished. Give it a quick press before moving on to the final step.